Hello, I'm Lucy from Colouring in the Midst of Madness, and today I am bringing you my comparison post of these, which are the UK and US editions of 30 Days of Creativity by Johanna Basford. Now the US edition is publishing on the 26th of October and the UK edition publishes on the 28th of October. So there are, I think, 30 differences pretty much. Some of these are differences between each other and some of them are differences between these and previous titles of Johanna. And so yeah, I have got a list to go through. I will try and remember to number them as I go. So let's get started because it's quite long. As ever, a lot of these differences are literally just things I've noticed. They don't affect enjoyment of the book. And they are just because I know that lots of people like me are interested in those differences. But there are a few things which I'll highlight as we go through that do affect your sort of use or enjoyment of the book. And I'll make those clear as we go through. So the first thing is the book size. Now, as you can see, both books are rectangular, which is the same as How to Draw Inky Wonderlands and Ivy and the Inky Butterfly. Now, each book is the same height as the previous editions of that country. So all of the UK books are 25 centimetres tall and all of the US books are 25.5 centimetres tall. Now, they are the same width as their own counterparts of rectangular books. So all three of Johanna's US rectangular books are exactly this shape and size, as are the UK ones. But as you can see, obviously this one is half a centimetre taller and wider than the UK edition. So if I pop them both together and then hold it up, you should be able to see. So I've got it completely flat to the side and to the bottom, and that's how much it goes over by. So it's not a lot, but it is different. So the next thing is the cover design. Now, as you can see, they're both pretty similar and they're both very floral, but there is a lot more around the edges and the corners of the design on the US edition compared to the UK edition. And because of this, it also means that these two butterflies are placed sort of slightly differently on each edition. So that was number 2. I can't remember if I said that or not. I get a bit lost with these. So number 3 is the cover colour. Now, I'm not sure how well this is going to show up, but the UK edition, which is underneath on the left, is a slightly sort of purer blue than the US edition, which is a very slightly purpler blue. So they're both really pale blue. They're really, really pretty. But yeah, they are slightly different from each other. So number 4 is the penguin logo. And that can be found here, hidden in the flowers on the US edition, and there isn't one on the UK edition, which I'll explain a bit more about later. But yeah, the penguin logo is always on the US cover, hidden somewhere. So number 5 is the foiling colour. So here we've got the UK edition and the US edition. I'm hoping that you'll see that the US edition foiling colour is ever so slightly yellower than the UK edition. They're both shiny gold foiling, but it is a bit yellower on the US edition. And they both don't have that much foiling on. So number 6 is the foiling aspects and amount, and actually they both have the same foiling apart from these two flowers. So you've got the left one on the US edition is foiled and the right one, but much further down, on the UK edition is foiled. But everything else, it's all exactly the same bits of foiling, which is unusual. They're not normally like that. There's normally completely different foiling on the covers. So number 7 is spelling. And as ever, this is the absolute easiest way of finding out which copy you are purchasing online. So on the front, thankfully, Johanna almost always puts the word colour on it. Now in the UK we spell colour with a U, and in the US they don't have the U. So that's the easiest way of finding it out. There are also spelling differences in the text in the book. So again, the word colour is in the book a lot, what with it being a colouring activity book. So that's a good one to find. But there's also favourite, which again doesn't have a U in the US spelling of it. Right, number 8 is the blurb. Now this time they have very slightly different blurbs. Quite often they have completely different blurbs. But here we have, so on the UK edition, this sentence reads, "These easy to follow daily practices will help unleash your creative spark." And then it ends. On the US edition, it continues with, "and build the foundation of your artistic practice." And that half a sentence isn't on the UK edition. I'm not sure why. Other than that, the blurbs are exactly the same, albeit they are laid out differently, as you can see paragraph wise. So next we are onto the spine. Now I've got the UK edition at the top and the US edition at the bottom. And as you can see, this time they both have white spines. Now most of the UK edition books have black spines with white writing, and the US editions always have white background with black writing. So in terms of getting a cohesive set, it's a bit tricky because the US editions are always like this, so they always match. But the UK editions, if the book is rectangular, it's always printed like this with a white background, but all of the others are done with a black background. You can also see that the font is the same, but then it's capitalised for the UK, but all in capitals for the US. We've also got the subtitle on the UK edition, but not on the US edition. And you can now see that the US edition is published by Penguin, and the UK edition is published by Ebury Press. So you've got their different publishing logos there at the bottom. So next we have got binding. Oh, right, let's take that back. So again, I've got UK at the top, US at the bottom. So you can see that the US edition is just glue bound, and the UK edition is string and glue bound. Now, for those of you who have had difficulty in the past with your books staying together, I would highly recommend the UK edition. There are no issues with the binding, and you can be, within reason, as rough as you like, and it will all hold together very nicely. I've just realised I haven't told you the number, so this is number 10 difference-wise. So yeah, this is a major thing that affects use. Lots of people have said that, especially with How to Draw Inky Wonderlands, because you're having to move the book around quite a lot. And again, this is an activity book, so you are going to need to move it around sometimes. If you've had any issues in the past or you're worried, get the UK edition because it won't fall apart. So number 11 is thickness. Now, it doesn't show up brilliantly. This book has, I think, fewer pages than some of the others, but the US edition is thicker than the UK edition, and that is because the paper is thicker. So I will come on to paper later, but you can see the difference in colour as well as the thickness. So number 12 is weight, and I can't show you that, but I have weighed them, and the UK edition weighs 402 grams and the US edition weighs 432 grams, so that's a 30-gram difference. So number 13 is the dust jacket. Now, this is actually a difference between these and the other editions of Johanna's books. So normally the UK edition would have a dust jacket that's removable, but this time, as with the other rectangular books that she's done, there is no removable dust jacket for either of them. This is a bit of a shame in terms of, like, some of us really like those, I do, and it also means that obviously it doesn't match the previous editions so well, albeit it does match the rectangular books. Sorry, I'm really struggling to get my words out. But yes, there isn't one, so you don't have a choice. So in some ways it makes it easier to make your choice about which edition you want, because you don't have to be swayed by whether it's got a dust jacket or not, because those are not available for this title. So number 14 is the French flaps and the images and layout. So I will just open these up. So at the front you can see that they've both got the same images. And actually it's at the back that it's slightly different. So let's open this. There we go. So as you can see, all of Johanna's previous titles from Lost Ocean onwards are shown, but they are done with all of the foiling printed in a sort of yellowy colour on black and white illustrations on the UK edition, and they're completely black and white on the US edition. Just checking, sorry, I'm reading my document to check that that is everything I need to say about that, which it is. Okay, so the next thing is the attachment of the cover to the front page, which is a bit tricky to show, but the UK edition cover is attached slightly further onto the pages than the US edition. Now this can make it quite tricky at first to open the UK book, because it's sort of kept quite tightly within there, and obviously because it goes further onto the pages, it means that when you open it sort of in the middle, they're quite curved, but that does ease up with use, and it just means that it's really secure on the pages, so they're really not going anywhere, and it's actually less of a difference than previous books. So I don't think it'll have a huge amount of impact on your colouring or anything. Number 16 is inside cover images, and they have exactly the same illustration, and it seems to be printed basically the same size, which means because the US edition is ever so slightly larger than the UK edition, you get slightly more image on all of the edges of the US edition. So if you look at the bit of pie over here, you can see that there's a much larger section of that image over on the US edition, and it's like that the whole way down the edge and again along the bottom as well. So number 17 is the paper. Now this is one of the biggest differences between the two editions. I'm afraid my light is fading, so I don't know how well this is going to show up, but I'm hoping it's showing up well enough. So on the left we've got the UK edition, and that has a really lovely sort of medium thickness ivory coloured paper. Now on the right we have the US edition, which again is a kind of cream coloured paper, a bit less white, but it's certainly not sort of yellowy or anything, it's just neither of them are white. And as you can see, they are different from each other. Now they each have the same papers in them as all of the previous editions. So everything from Magical Jungle onwards in the UK was printed on this paper, and everything again Magical Jungle onwards in the US was printed on this paper. So they are the same as all of the previous editions you might have from that specific country. Both papers are really good for pretty much all mediums apart from very wet or alcohol markers, because those will bleed through. In terms of drawing, there's something I'll show you later. The US edition, because it has slightly more tooth, pens can spread on it a little bit. So they don't spread through, but they do spread sort of, they feather a little bit sideways, which can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's really not awful. So either one is fine paper-wise, it's just personal preference really. Difference number 18 is the title page image size. So these bits at the bottom are nearly the same, but actually the UK edition has slightly more of the flowers. You can see where this leaf begins is higher up the page than the US one. This floral border is printed 0.5 centimetre larger in the US edition than the UK edition, but that really isn't a lot. So the next thing is the copyright page. Let's get these over. So you can see that the information is printed quite differently. There's also different information. And they have different ISBNs, the books. Number 20 is also on this page, and that's the printing location. So the UK edition is printed in China, and the US edition is printed in the United States of America. Right, number 21 is language differences. Now, I won't bother showing you this in here to find examples, but there are various things where different words are used in each edition. So, for example, there are ice lollies in the UK and popsicles in the US. There's a recipe in here later on, and there are grams in the UK edition and self-raising flour. And in the US, there are cup measurements and self-rising flour. And they also have the different oven temperatures as well, because I think America often uses Fahrenheit and the UK uses Celsius. So number 22, let's just turn a couple of pages. Oh, too far. Is this page. We get onto the fiddly bit now, trying to flick all the pages gets a bit challenging. Okay, so all of these are the same, they're the same text and they have the same image, apart from this one, and the UK edition has this bee printed again, whereas the US edition has a butterfly. I'm not sure why, but there we are, it does. Next is, right, the image size. So on a few pages, it's really not very many in this book at all. We have slightly different printing size. So this is one of the examples of a page. Now this is up to a maximum of 1 centimetre difference, but as you can see, it's really not a huge difference at all. I'm just going to move this back a bit. So in the US edition, because of the slightly larger book size, occasionally the images are printed slightly larger. So this one I believe is about 0.8 centimetres. So yeah, about 8 millimetres bigger than this, but that's overall, so that's not sort of per box, it's spread across all of the boxes. So it makes barely any difference to your enjoyment of the book or your use of it or anything like that. So number 24 is, let's find the right page. Oh, I haven't gone far enough. I probably should have put post-its in to mark these out, but I forgot. Right, so on this page, there is actually a word missing in the US edition. So in this section here, the sentence says, challenging, yes, but never tiresome. If it feels, and it should say like, trudging through honey, stop. But there is no like on this one, and there is on the UK edition. So sorry for noticing that, but it's the kind of thing my brain notices. There's also another, but this actually isn't sort of missing. But on this page, which let's just find it in both, this quote is attributed to Picasso, and Picasso's name is on the UK edition, but not on the US edition. So that's number 25. Number 26, definitely regretting the lack of post-its now. We have a slightly different orientation of the printing of this image. So I've got the US edition on top, and the UK edition has the image printed further right on the page, and so there's a much bigger gap between the middle of the book, the gutter, and the image starting than on the US edition. And because of that and the book size, it means you've got sort of half a line extra of image on the US edition compared to the UK one, but that's only on that page. It's really strange. I'm not sure why that's happened. Number 27 is ink permanency. Now I'm going to hold this up. So this is the UK book, and I have gone over the whole of the word test with a Caran d'Ache blender pencil, and as you can hopefully see, there is absolutely no movement of ink whatsoever from the page ink. On the US edition, I've done exactly the same on the word test, and you can see that it's gone a little bit murky. This means that the ink sort of isn't quite as permanent as you might like. Now this generally isn't a problem, but you just need to be slightly careful if you're using blender pencils or pushing really hard with other pencils right up to the edges, because you might start bringing in some of the ink pigment into your work, which might make it a little bit murky. As with all of the colouring books I've ever used, if you ever transfer ink by pressing hard from the colouring designs, that can be erased with a regular eraser. So it's not a huge problem, it's just something to be aware of. Now I also mentioned earlier about the spreading of the ink. So these little designs I have drawn with the same pen, and they are super crisp on the UK edition, but just slightly less crisp, slightly more spreading on the US edition. But as you can see, it's really not a big deal, and these are very small and they're very close to the camera. So certainly from sort of looking further away, you really won't notice that as a difference. So the last differences aren't actually sort of things to look at. So number 28 is the publication dates, which I think I accidentally mentioned earlier because I forgot I'd numbered them. But yes, the US edition publishes on Tuesday the 26th of October, and the UK edition publishes on Thursday the 28th of October. Number 29 is the availability. Now, for the last few years, there's actually been quite a struggle in getting hold of the US edition in the UK. Now, because I'm from the UK, I don't know about availability anywhere else. And generally, in the past, Book Depository was absolutely brilliant for having all sorts of international editions. But for the last 2 or 3 books of Johanna's, it's been really difficult here to get hold of the US edition. Now, a friend of mine very kindly sent me the link to it, but currently it's out of stock. Actually, I think it's just unavailable. But you can sign up to be notified of when it's back in stock and able to be shipped out. So I will put the links to both editions on Amazon UK and Book Depository in the description box. But I'm afraid I can't guarantee that people in the UK will be able to get the US edition because they do seem to be harder and harder to come by. The final thing is a treasure hunt. Now, I am guessing that this has sort of been scrapped in Johanna's books. I think the last 3 or 4 haven't had a treasure hunt, but because the first few of her books did, I think it was the first sort of 5 or 6 did, I do mention it because I know some people really liked those, some people weren't bothered, some people didn't like them. So it's just something I mention, that this does not have a treasure hunt. There's no sort of seek and find aspect. But of course you could create your own if you wish, and then put a little key somewhere at the back so that you know what you've hidden in the pages. But yeah, there is no treasure hunt in this title. So I think that's everything. That is 30 differences, which is what I believe I promised at the beginning. And I think overall I would probably recommend the UK edition because of the binding. And certainly in the UK, it's much easier to get hold of this than the US edition. However, they're really not that different from each other, and they are both equally lovely. The binding is a bit more of an issue on the US edition, but personally, I've never yet had a book fall apart on me. But because I review a lot and I look at so many books, I don't tend to use one lots and lots and lots. So it's possible that I'm just able to sort of not use it so much, and therefore that's why my books are staying intact. But yeah, I personally, I wouldn't just be swayed by that, but the UK edition is really lovely, and I am someone who really likes things to match. So I always like to have the UK editions as that's where I live. But yeah, I have reviewed the UK edition, and the contents is basically the same as you've seen. So there's a link to that in the description box. There's a post of it with photos and text, and there's also a video review that I've done. Please do let me know in the comments what you think of the book, of the comparison, which copy you're going to get. I think even if I wasn't sent copies, I always used to buy one of each when they were available. I always like to have both. I like seeing the differences, I like seeing the similarities, and I just like having 2 copies so that I can do things twice. So I would certainly recommend that if you can't choose. But yes, if you are going to choose, do let me know what you're choosing. And do please give the video a thumbs up. And yeah, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.